Okay, this isn't your typical entitled people story, but it's a crazy one that I still wanted to share. Back in 2012, I was living in Japan working as an English teacher. I taught at 4 different schools, rotating from school to school on a weekly basis. This story takes place at the school furthest away from where I lived. The train ride home was roughly 1 hour and 20 minutes. I finished teaching my classes and was at the station waiting for my train to arrive. There was a middle-aged Japanese man who we'll call Mr. Shima, who looked at me, a 32-year-old Caucasian male, and probably thought to himself, "Oh, look, a gaijin, foreigner, he's going to be my new best friend." Mr. Shima comes up to me, puts his arm over my shoulder, and starts talking to me as if we've been friends for years. He reeked of cheap booze and bad curry. I didn't want anything to do with this man, but 2 things that were driven into my head during job training was that U.S. foreign English teachers were the faces of the company, and we are also ambassadors who are privileged to be living in Japan. So we needed to be on our best behavior at all times. With this in mind, I politely responded to Mr. Shima, but kept my responses short and blunt in the hopes that he would lose interest in me and walk away. Well, that tactic didn't work. After a while, my train pulls in. I bid Mr. Shima farewell and ran into the train, praying that he was waiting for a different one. Unfortunately, he followed me in and sits right next to me, showing no respect for personal boundaries. I asked him where his stop was, praying that he would get of the train shortly. Well, my rotten luck. Mr. Shima's stop was just a few stops before mine, so I was going to be stuck with this man for over an hour. I tried thinking of an excuse to get him to leave me alone. I pulled out my textbooks and said, "Hey, I need to prepare for my lessons tomorrow. Can you please leave me alone so I can prepare for my classes?" Mr. Shima responded, No. You can do that later. Let's talk and hang out." I tried to reiterate that this was for work and I needed to focus on it, but Mr. Shima kept saying that it could wait and that we needed to hang out. After this, and maybe another attempt or 2 at getting him to leave me alone failed, I decided to just suffer through the train ride with him pestering me. So, about an hour later, which felt like an eternity to me, Mr. Shima is still violating my personal space and obnoxiously talking to me. I was chomping at the bit to be rid of this man as we got closer to his stop. Due to his limited English, drunken slurring, and my limited Japanese, I only understood about half of everything he was saying, but what he said next completely caught me off guard. Mr. Shima, "Hey, do you want to get off at the next stop and look for prostitutes?" Me, No, thank you." Mr. Shima, "Well, why not?" Me, "Because I have a girlfriend back in the States, and I don't want to cheat on her." Mr. Shima, "Oh, do you have a picture of her?" Now, I'll admit I didn't have a girlfriend at that time. I lied to Mr. Shima, trying to think of an excuse to tell him why I didn't want to look for prostitutes with him, rather than tell him the truth that he was an annoying, obnoxious drunk that I couldn't stand. Fortunately, I did have a picture of a friend from college in my wallet that I pulled out and showed Mr. Shima, passing her off as my girlfriend. Mr. Shima looked at the picture and said, "Mr. Shima, wow, she's beautiful. She should be thankful to have such a loyal boyfriend like you in her life who won't cheat on her. You know what you need. You need a good, loyal Japanese wife." He then spots 2 younger Japanese girls, probably in their early to mid-20s. He ran up to them and yelled, "Mr. Shima, hey, are either of you 2 single? I'm looking for a good and loyal Japanese woman to marry my gaijin friend over there," pointing right at me. Mr. Shima then pulls out his wallet and starts throwing money at the girls, and continued to scream, "Mr. Shima, here, take my money. How much will it take to get one of you 2 to marry my friend?" At this point, I've had enough of Mr. Shima, and I was afraid to see how he was going to harass these girls if he stayed on the train any longer. The train pulls into the next station. It was still a few stops away from his, but I rushed up to him and said, "Me! Oh, Mr. Shima! This is your stop." Mr. Shima, "Oh, really?" Me, "Yep, this is it. Time to get off the train." I escorted Mr. Shima off the train. He smiled and waved back at me, saying that we should hang out again sometime. I got back on the train, smiled, and waved as the doors closed and the train took off again. I immediately ran to the girls and apologized profusely, saying that I was so sorry that Mr. Shima harassed them. He was not my friend, and that he was just a drunk who's been annoying me for over an hour. The two girls thanked me for coming to their rescue. They assured me that they were all right, and that one, they now have a crazy story they can tell their friends. And two, they have all this money that Mr. Shima threw at them. The girls invited me to sit with them and talk till we got to my stop. They tipped me some of the money Mr. Shima threw at them for my heroic actions, and I walked back to my apartment. In hindsight, could I have handled this situation better? Probably. Do I regret how I handled it in the spur of the moment? Definitely not. Once again, I was terrified thinking about what Mr. Shima might have done with these girls if he stayed on the train. But in the end, I don't wish any ill will towards him, and I do hope he managed to make his way back to his final destination okay. But what would you have done? How would you have handled this situation? Me and my stepdad have always been quite close. He's always been supportive and always been there for me more than my own father has been. Regardless, me and my girlfriend moved into my grandmother's house just over a year ago to help her around the house a little more. Me and my girlfriend both having relatively nice cars parked on the driveway, I asked if he would install a camera onto the house to keep an eye on them. He did this for me. I offered him the money and he didn't charge me anything. I didn't think anything of it until last autumn. I'd gone to visit my friend for the day, who lives about 80 miles away. I'd come home about 7 p.m., and as my grandma went to bed, me and my girlfriend decided to go out for a bit of a date night. I got a phone call from my stepdad around 9:30 p.m. asking if I was okay as I wasn't home yet. I straight away knew he'd checked the camera to see if I was home yet. I was fuming and told him I don't appreciate being clocked in and out. He took offense to this and thought I was being ungrateful. Since then, he hasn't really made any comments. But then, a couple of months ago, me and my girlfriend had a baby. She was in the hospital for a while, and he kept checking when I was home from the hospital each evening. I knew because the minute my car got onto the drive, it was, "Don't forget to put in your car for tomorrow." Or if I stayed out for a while later, "I'd get when you get home, can you?" Which suggests he knew I wasn't. I had the odd digs I didn't want him watching me, so a few weeks ago, he made it quite obvious he'd checked if I was in before coming to visit with my mum. Fuming, I unplugged the camera from the internet so that I could only access it when I needed to. I wanted to see how long it would take him to notice a problem, but he's instead been in a funny mood for a few weeks instead. Today he came to inspect as it had gone down, and I openly and honestly told him I appreciate what he's done for us, but I don't want him stalking us. He threw a massive tantrum, accused me of being ungrateful, and tried guilt-tripping me in saying it's only because he cares. He then deleted it from his access, or so he claimed anyway. I don't mind him having access. It helps in keeping an eye on my grandma if she ventures out or anything. But I'm a grown adult who doesn't need clocking in and out. It massively breaches data protection. It's weird, and what winds me up the most is him having a tantrum about it. Players are John, owner of an auto shop, Tim, another mechanic, jerkface, customer, and me, other tech. This occurred in the mid-90s, so the details may be a bit off. John owned a small automotive repair shop, doing general repairs on most brands of vehicles. There were 3 of us working there, the owner and 2 techs. We got a call one day from a new customer whose BMW would not start and was nearby at a golf course. I sent a tow truck and had the BMW put into a stall. Sure enough, it would crank over but not fire off and start. I checked for spark, and there was plenty. Now, to check the fuel system. No fuel pressure. Went under the hood again to check the fuel pump relay. No problem there. Now, to check power at the fuel pump. The manual said the fuel pump was in the inner fender liner. In front of the left rear wheel. Pulled the wheel off and the liner back and low, and behold, no fuel pump. There was a fuel filter there, though. Went back to the manual and looked up the next production year BMW, and it said the fuel pump was internally mounted in the fuel tank. I cleaned myself up well, car had white leather, and removed the rear seat to access the fuel pump. The fuel pump only has power while cranking of engine running, so I got Tim to crank the engine over while I checked power to the fuel pump. Pump had power to it. I priced out the fuel pump and wrote the estimate. It came out to approximately $625. When the customer called for the estimate, Tim answered the phone and gave him this total of $525.68. No towing included. It was on the ticket, but Tim just missed it. At the last minute, I remembered the fuel filter and ordered one and installed it on the vehicle at no labor, just the cost of the fuel filter plus a little tax. When Jerkface came to pick up the car, I heard a lot of loud voices in the office and went in and took over the customer. He wanted to know why his bill was $625 instead of the $525 he was quoted. I explained that the quote Tim gave him did not include the towing cost, and that I had forgotten the fuel filter at 25.0 plus tax and had installed it at no labor charge. Jerkface raised his voice, suggesting that the fuel filter was the problem and not the fuel pump. I assured him this was not the case and he demanded the old parts. No problem, as we would just throw them away anyway. He wrote a check. About a week later, the check came back as stopped payment. Turns out, Jerkface lived in another county, and our district attorney's office, local prosecutor, will not take action on out of county checks. John calls the customer to see why he would stop payment on the check. Jerkface ranted that he had taken the fuel pump to his mechanic, and that guy said the fuel pump was good and that we had ripped him off. Total nonsense, as a restricted fuel filter won't hardly keep a vehicle from starting, although it might affect the acceleration a bit. Fast forward to a few months later, and we sued Jerkface in small claims court. A friend who is an attorney represented us for free and said his fee would be $500. We added that to the mix. We paid $25 for a process server, and he was served. Jerkface never showed up for court, so we won by default. Now his bill is around $1,175 with court costs, attorney fees, and such. In Texas, if a customer does not pay for a car repair, we can enforce a mechanic's lien on the vehicle, which the customer agrees to when he signs the repair order and even takes it from anywhere we find it. Also, it can't be sold to another party with a lien on it. A couple of months later, we were telling this story to another local who owns a tire shop. Turns out, the same Jerkface had bought a set of tires and stopped payment on that check as well. Jerkface was trying to play the system knowing that out-of-county checks won't be prosecuted. A few months after that, I saw the BMW at the local golf course parking lot and sent a wrecker to pick it up. Now, the bill is $1,350 with the impound fee. The wrecker company took the car to their yard and then called the local police department to inform them of a repossession. When Jerkface finished his golf game and came out to go home, he found his car missing, so he called the police to report it stolen. The police informed him it had been taken on a mechanic's lien and to not come on our property unless it was to pay for his outstanding bill. Jerkface called up and yelled at John, cursing and hollering. John hung up on him. Jerkface called back, cursing and hollering again. John hung up again. Jerkface called back a third time, and John told him, "If you want to discuss this like an adult, I will. Otherwise, I am not going to listen to cursing and yelling." John explained that the bill to redeem his car was now $1,350. Jerkface said, "I'll sue you." John asked him if he remembered being served by the constable a few months ago, that we sued him already and he never showed up. Jerkface then said he would just let the bank take the car back. Okay, no problem there. The bank will pay the bill and auction the car, and whatever wasn't covered by the auction Jerkface will still owe. I got the call from the bank asking how much was owed on our bill. I informed them of the balance due, and I asked the banker what was owed on the car. The balance at the bank was around $9,000, and the car was worth around $6,000. At auction, it might bring $3,500 so if Jerkface let it go back. To the bank, not only would he have a repossession hurting his credit, he would still owe the bank around $6,850 and have no car. Jerkface's wife called and asked to come in and pay for the car. We told her the amount and told her only cash. She came and paid. Now for the revenge. We called our friend at the tire shop, the one that Jerkface had screwed over on the tires. I think it was around $1,100. He arranged for a wrecker to pick up the car after Jerkface's wife paid us and took it to another impound yard, incurring another $175 impound, plus the tires cost. I bet his wife was pissed, and that probably put an end to his golfing for a while.